Before we dive in, here's another show you can enjoy in the True Story FM family of entertainment podcasts.
Do you ever get to the end of a movie where the hero had to make a difficult choice, and all you want to do is talk to people about whether they made the right one?
Watch an episode of Star Trek and spend the next few days thinking about the rights of synthetic beings like Data and the Doctor. I became a co-host of the Superhero Ethics podcast because I love those questions, and the people at Wendy's are tired of hearing me talk about them.
We're not a review podcast. We're more interested in questions the characters face and how different works approach similar questions. Sometimes we'll even go behind the camera, talking about how on-screen media gets made and how that affects what questions get asked, which ones don't, and who gets to ask them.
We hit a wide range of media: movies, TV shows, books, and video games.
You can find us under Superhero Ethics wherever you listen to podcasts or go to theethicalpanda.com. But you can also do far more. We love listener feedback and we'll happily talk about your questions or comments on air, and members get special bonus content.
Hashtag not sponsored by Wendy's.
What's up, Supernatural superfans? I'm Chrissy Lenz.
And I'm Nate McWhorter.
And we're the host of
Gank That Drink,
a supernatural drinking game podcast.
It's the podcast where we make up drinking game rules for a favorite episode of our favorite show, Supernatural.
We recap the episode for you and let you know how all the rules played out.
Then we let you know the drinking game rules for the next episode, so you can play along.
Plus, members get every episode early and ad-free,
with some extra bonus content chit-chat at the end of each episode as a member exclusive.
So download Gank That Drink, a supernatural drinking game podcast, wherever the finest podcasts are available.
And or become a member at truestory.fm/gankthatdrink.
And when you're out there in the world saving people and hunting things,
you know, the family business.
Keep the Gank That Drink motto in mind. Be excellent to each other and party on, dudes.
Coming up on The Devil's Details, me and the devil was walking side by side. The Devil and Robert Johnson. Good morning, Star, and welcome to another episode of The Devil's Details, a show where we dig up, decipher, dissect, and deconstruct the many forms of the devil. One of my names is Lester Ryan Clark.
And I sometimes go by Keenan Diaz.
And we're just two lost souls hitchhiking down the highway to hell. But it looks like today we came upon a crossroads. Now, folks, this tale we're about to tell is probably one of the most formative deal with the devil legends, right up there with the Faust legend. This is what I like to think of as the American version of that. I wasn't kidding when I said this is a crossroads. This is where a lot of disparate tropes and ideas about the devil come together and meet here at this intersection. And from here, they're always traveling together. They become the basis for how the American devil is shaped and how deals with him are done. One of the most famous stories in American music and American culture, and it is the birthplace of a cultural movement that would change the world. But actually, I'm a little ashamed to say this is my first time encountering this story. I had never heard of it before until Keenan proposed it to me. Keenan, this sounds like something you know a little bit more about. How did you come about this story?
Hey, man. Forgive yourself, because Robert Johnson is so interesting because the more you look into him, the more questions there are, as we'll talk about, because of you know, the time he was born, the place he was born, and how he died.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've known him a little bit, frankly, because of my other forays into the devil, like the fiddle contest and the robot devil and all of that. And it all tracks back down to Robert Johnson in some ways.
Okay.
And there are a lot of people, you know, doing research this weekend to look at Robert Johnson. There's a lot of people who are discovering him because of Ryan Coogler's Sinners, which is out in theaters as we're talking. And that movie is not about the devil. I don't know how spoilery to be. But it's a horror movie, and there's two twin brothers. One's a blues singer, and he may have made deals with bad people.
Mm.
But it's not specifically about the devil, but there are people who are looking and finding him today. So yeah, we're not the only ones who are just now starting to dive into Robert Johnson.
Yes, I have Sinners on my list. I want to see that. But like, you are the second person to recommend it to me.
Yeah, it's not directly about Robert Johnson, but Ludwig Göransson, the composer, right, who works with Ryan Coogler all the time, he said in interviews that he is certainly inspired in his score by Robert Johnson.
Yeah.
And so there's, as I was looking at YouTube videos this week, all the comments, there's some version of somebody saying, I came here because of Sinners.
Okay, all right. Sinners brought me here.
Yeah, exactly.
There's a little shirt with a little arrow. It says, I'm with Sinners.
Yeah, exactly.
I watched Sinners, and all I got was this shirt.
I watched Sinners, and all I got was this interest in African American culture.
Yeah, and a really good. How long is it?
Sinners? Oh, too long.
A really good 2 hours and 45 minutes.
All movies nowadays are too long.
It was the Lord of the Rings. They started that shit, and now everybody's like, well, you gotta have the extended cut. Yeah. It's Sinners. Can't just talk about one.
Yeah, if we just had one, we could save another 20 minutes off of this thing easily.
And that's the one directed by Ridley Scott, and it's
oh God, I got into another argument about
Sigourney Weaver's in there.
Yes, I got into another conversation. Someone asked me, which version of Blade Runner should I watch? I said, I don't care which version of Blade Runner you watch. Yeah. Damn you, Ridley Scott. All right.
Okay.
Where are we here? So yeah, Robert Johnson though is key to the creation of rock and roll. He wasn't a rock and roll artist himself; he was a blues singer.
Right.
But then we're going to see he is incredibly influential, which is surprising for somebody who only made 29 records. Yeah, as in 29 tracks of records. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, and only has 2 photographs taken of him.
Yeah.
And we don't know when he was born, where he died, why he died. Yeah. We don't know all sorts of things about him.
Yeah. And in my notes, folks, as we go, I do have supposed facts for each of those things that Keenan mentioned. But again, it's nobody knows for sure. And that kind of is what adds to the mystique of this person and this story.
Right.
Now, I said before, this is kind of like a definitive deal with the devil story. Of course, there have been deals with the devil in the past. Looking back, I can't believe we didn't make this connection. But, the devil has been making deals since the beginning with a capital B, right? In fact, the first person he makes a deal with is God in the book of Job. Remember, this is before he became capital S, Satan. And then we got the serpent in the Garden of Eden. Again, not originally Satan until our buddy Thomas Aquinas made that tweet. He's like, time to drop a really big bomb. No, that's another devil. And then how can we forget Satan's attempt to strike a deal with Jesus in the desert? Right. Now, if you have been following us from the beginning, you know that these might all have been different characters at first, but they culminated into the singular devil we know and love today. The reason I bring it up here is, isn't it funny how we decided all these different characters were the same guy from stories where they're making deals? Deals seem to be the devil's crossroad. It's the one consistent thing in all these stories, and maybe the thing that most defines him, at least to us humans. That's our crossroad with him. It's the only time we mortals interact with him is through a deal. Right?
That's really interesting.
Yeah, we're not fighting battles with him. We're not, talking about creation or the world's problems with him. We only meet him in these stories because he wants to tempt us or make a deal with us.
Okay, so we might be possessed by demons or something smaller than the devil, but the devil himself is someone that we need to have agency in order to reject or to accept, I guess.
I think so. I think that's kind of the thing that differentiates him from his minions.
Interesting.
Yeah, at least in the stories, Okay, so now I'm talking about Crossroads. Crossroads feature heavily in this story, and we're pretty sure this is the story that made them part of devil lore. But Crossroads have always featured in spooky tales even before this due to their liminal nature. Now, if you follow our other show, Every Minute of Everything Everywhere All at Once, we just got done talking about liminal spaces. Crossroads are one of the OG liminal spaces, and they've been around since the invention of roads. Think about it. It's an in-between place, right? It's not your destination, but it's not where you started either, right? It's this weird limbo. Sorry, Kyle. Kyle hates when we do that. Another thing about crossroads is that unlike other structures, they tend not to change. Civilization kind of grows around them, but the roads kind of like stay where they are. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And naturally, from there, they came to be thought of as an intersection between the human world and the spirit world. Some folks believe that the spiritual realm is not like in a different place. It exists in the exact same place as the earthly one, right? Like heaven and hell aren't far away. They're like right here, like an animation cell over a painted background, right? It's like layers on layers on layers, right? And the crossroads is where that veil is thin. They're not just liminal for us. They're liminal for ghosts and devils and angels, I guess. I've not heard a story about that, but
of angels walking down the road, going to the supermarket or whatever.
Maybe, I don't know. But I mean, like passing through the plains and everything like that. You only hear about like ghosts and like the dead and demons kind of like breaking through into this world. Angels, they just show up. You know, be not afraid and all that. You know.
Okay. So they're not, maybe because we don't associate angels with the earth itself, and we do associate devils, the devil with earth itself a little bit more than angels do.
Right. Yeah. But folks, it's not just stories. You cannot tell me that you have never been at a crossroads out in the middle of nowhere at night and haven't felt something. You know, or even in the day, like walking down a country road, you get to a crossroads, you look left, you look right, you look ahead, and there's nothing for miles. It feels a little liminally. I didn't even need to add the ly because liminal is an adjective.
It's an adjective.
Look at that. Yeah. But also back in the day, people would really only see crossroads while like traveling on long journeys away from the safety and the comfort of their own homes, right? Not like today where, you get in the car and, you can't throw a plastic bottle without hitting a crossroads. We're lousy with crossroads.
Yeah, I mean, there are people who live in one state and go and commute into another state nowadays every day. Yeah, yeah. But back then it would be relatively rare, it'd be dangerous to do this.
Right. Yeah. And speaking of that, right, it's also a meeting spot, right, where you would meet literally anybody walking down the other road from somewhere to somewhere completely separate from your story. And this is where your stories intersect, right? And it's hard for humans to say, oh, that doesn't mean anything, right? Like the fact that I met this guy at the crossroads, like we have to assign meaning to that,
Yeah. Once as I was on the road to St. Ives, I met a man with 7 wives. Each wife had 7 sacks. Each sack had 7 cats. Each cat had 7 kits. You know this?
No, you're telling me.
It sounds like you don't know this.
Apparently, this happened to you. You're just telling me about it.
Yeah, it's a first-person narrative. Yes.
Yeah. No, why have you never told me this, Keenan?
No. So as I was going to St. Ives, I met a man with 7 wives. Each wife had 7 sacks. Each sack had 7 cats. Each cat had 7 kits. Kits, cats, sacks, and wives. How many were there going to St. Ives? I ask you, Lester Ryan Clark.
Oh, Jesus. Is that... No, we're not doing math. On my escape place, like where I go to get away from the evils of the world.
Right, on summer vacation.
Yeah. I don't know if you've been keeping up with current events, man. I'm in LA right now, folks, and it is Sunday, June 8th. So yeah, just do a quick Google and figure out what's going on right now.
With LA, it could be anything.
Yeah. And it's everything.
No. Try to figure out how many people are going to St. Ives in this. This is a
I'm not going to do that. My brain immediately just said no.
Well, tell me how you might solve this.
If the devil gave me this contest, I would be like, I guess I'm going to hell.
Tell me how you might approach this riddle.
Oh, Jesus. Okay. Yeah, 7 wives. Each one had 7 sacks, so that's 7 times 7, that's 49.
Yeah.
Each sack had 7 cats.
That's right.
So that's 49 times 7, which I already
All right.
hate this.
And then you would times it by 7 kittens.
Yes.
Okay, so whatever that is, 49 times 49.
Yeah.
Okay. However, Lester, from this riddle from 1730, you have not passed it. I apologize.
Well,
I was going to St. Ives, and the others were coming from St. Ives.
Yes.
So one was going to St. Ives.
Oh, my hatred for math.
Your fear led to anger.
Anger led to hatred, and And the 7 younglings ended up in 7 sacks.
7 sacks.
And I did not save the cat.
That's right.
No. Wow. Okay. There we go. Well, this is worse than any punishment a devil can inflict upon somebody. Ugh. Okay.
You're
Anyway.
the very first person who didn't get this right.
Oh, thanks.
No. This is a very common asshole riddle to say
Okay,
to your friends since 1730 in the year of our Lord.
Yeah. Oh, where did they bury the survivors?
Why can't women do surgery?
No, that's an actual. That you know what? That
Okay.
we're not gonna get into that.
No.
I can't operate on this boy. He's my son. We've told that joke. It's everybody knows.
Right, okay.
It's because the doctor is a woman and nobody thinks that a doctor can be a woman, or a woman can be a doctor. Yeah.
Anyways, that's the anger about Crossroads.
Yes.
That's what Crossroads do to people.
See, before that, after this research, I was like, oh man, now every time I go to a Crossroads, I'm gonna have this like cool spooky feeling, and I'm gonna have some blues music in my brain, and now it's just gonna be, I'm gonna get to a Crossroads, and there's like 7 cats in the fucking stupid riddle.
Stupid Keaton.
And then somebody's gonna come up from the other path and be like, hey, I know how you can get back at Keenan. And we're like, well, tell me more, devil.
Right.
Yeah. But okay, actually, folks, the idea of Crossroads being these magical places might have originated in Haitian voodoo. That's Vodou. This is a religion that mixes Roman Catholic influences with West African spiritualism. There is one all-powerful God, but you can only speak to him through these beings called Loa. And to speak with the Loa, you must first speak with Papa Legba, who is the Loa of Crossroads. And I really want to get more into Papa Legba at some point. He's not a devil. He's more of a trickster god, more of a Loki figure, but more than just that, even. Folks, do yourself a favor, check out Papa Legba. He's really interesting. But the reason I bring him up here is that he is one of the many figures our devil borrowed/stole from, specifically this Crossroads edition. And actually, some versions of this story have Robert Johnson making a deal with Papa Legba and not the devil.
Ah, okay.
Yeah. But yeah, so voodoo made its way from Haiti when people were brought over to Louisiana as slaves. And from there, these magic traditions known as hoodoo spread out across the American South. Now that's Hoodoo. And more learned listeners, please correct me if I'm wrong about this. I take it that the difference is voodoo is an actual religion originated in Africa, and hoodoo is a folk magic practice, not a religion itself, which originated in the American South. So voodoo has a theology and a pantheon, and hoodoo is practical magic for everyday concerns like protection, healing, love, prosperity. You can be a Christian and practice hoodoo, and many did. Just like before the witch burnings, a lot of early Christians, like the Vikings, were still using charms and spells for their farm or whatever, right? But this hoodoo may be the origin of that Crossroads myth I was talking about.
Yeah, that's how I understand hoodoo as well. And of course, if you believe hoodoo, us saying it like that might not be, helpful or sensitive to you. Right? But like if you practice hoodoo as part of your other religion, it's like syncretized with Islam or with Christianity usually.
Yeah. And this is where a lot of people believe that the Crossroads lore comes from.
Okay.
But before we can even get to the Crossroads, we got to follow this guy, this Robert Johnson, born Robert Leroy Johnson on May 8th of 1911. Maybe. There's no record of his birth. His sister said that their mom told her that was the day, but that also doesn't line up with the 1920 census or Johnson's enrollment record. But these could have been, fudged for a better education at a young age.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Yeah, we take it for granted now that there are birth certificates. This is only 100 years ago, which is why it's so it's hard for us to imagine in America, even in a really a poor part of America, right? That you don't have a record of birth. But usually, I think it was Jimmy Carter's the first president to be born in a hospital. You know,
What?
And, yeah, I think that's right. My trivia spidey sense is tingling there. I think that's correct. Right, that seems like, Jimmy Carter is a modern person, right?
That is wild.
Yeah, and then I think George H.W. Bush, who came afterwards, is the last one not born in the hospital, born at home.
Oh,
so like
okay.
people, within our lifetime, major people, it was common that they were born at home, and that also meant that they didn't necessarily have record keepers right over their shoulder all the time.
Right.
And also, I don't know about Robert Johnson's time, but for a lot of people, you often wouldn't record a baby's birth because infant mortality was so high.
Right.
Yeah, so you wouldn't rush out and like make the kind of announcements we have today that the baby was born, because the baby might not make it.
Right. Yeah. So for all of those reasons as well, mystery sort of surrounds this guy and kind of like adds to the mystique of this tale. Yeah. But from what we understand, he was born in Mississippi. Father Charles Dodds was a black landowner, not very popular in Mississippi in 1911. I don't imagine it's popular now. But hey, let's pretend that we learned since then.
Okay.
On threat of destruction of his property and lynching, the family moved to Memphis, which I'm sure was much better. Yeah, I'm kidding. But while in Memphis, this is where they say Robert got bit by the music bug. And soon he moved back to Mississippi to be with his mother, who was now married to a sharecropper. Do we gotta explain what sharecropping is?
Just that it was a really bad economic system, right?
Really quick. So it was a labor system that emerged in the American South after slavery was abolished. And yes, many historians do characterize it as slavery by another name, though there were like a couple little differences. So how it worked, former enslaved people worked land owned by white landowners. Instead of wages, they received a share of the crop that they produced, typically about 1/3. The landowner provided land, tools, seeds, and often housing, and sharecroppers had to buy supplies and food on credit from the landowner's store. Do you see how this is a problem? Like how this is never going to turn out good, right? They're not being paid in money. They're being paid like 1/3 of the crops that they make, and they're going to be like in debt for their entire lives on this plantation.
Right.
Basically slavery.
There wasn't the inherent, legal ownership and all of that stuff, but you were effectively, and sometimes in the early days, you were often a sharecropper to your former enslaver, specifically, or maybe your parents' former enslaver.
So while like maybe you have these kind of like, it's like, well, technically, it's you still have that kind of, just the feeling of that. That's gotta kill you inside,
Right. But with the promise that if you, work hard enough, yada, 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 that you'll be able to save enough money and get your own place and that kind of thing, which was really rare and very rarely happened.
Yeah. And it just like, it damn near impossible. I just explained the system. It's like it's set up to trap you, basically. Yeah. But yeah, so and Robert's life was no different. It was very, very hard. He didn't want to work on his stepfather's plantation. His stepfather frequently beat him. But through it all, Robert played music. He had a special talent for the harmonica, but really he wanted to play guitar. And he wanted to make a name for himself in this new and controversial genre of music called the blues. Now, by 1928 and 29, when Robert was 18, blues was specifically despised by evangelicals in the southern U.S. It was seen as the devil's music. And the evangelicals claimed that anyone who played it or even listened to it would lose their soul.
And you're saying like white evangelicals mostly?
Yes, specifically white evangelicals. Right? So I wonder why they hate this type of music. Right?
Yeah, and they definitely didn't want blues music to spread into white communities, but it did sometimes, right? Because
it was good.
It was good. But we're also talking in the 1920s, by the time of mass media, where you wouldn't necessarily, if you had a white daughter in the 1920s, she wouldn't necessarily have to go over to the black side of town unescorted and then go to a juke joint and listen to black music. Now she could get a record or something, right? Or potentially even listen to it on. There weren't a whole lot of black radio stations that were playing it, but potentially, right, like playing, your daughter could listen to it on the radio by accident, right, and then fall in love with it, and so that was part of the white panic over black music at the time. Is that you used to have to actually go there physically, and now you didn't have to do that anymore.
Right.
But there's also splits within black communities. There's this like double-edged sword about jazz, which jazz and the blues, and later on rock and roll. Like you hear interviews with people like Aretha Franklin or Mavis Staples, or people who sang what we call soul music now, right? And they were expected to sing gospel music when they were kids and just church music. And so even for them to start doing blues would sometimes be controversial within their families.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And so there was, and that my sources do say that like some black religious groups hated it as well. But the way they try to paint it, they try to use it as proof. Like, see, everybody hated it. But I think like those are two different types of dislike, right? Like, every generation of parents and every religious group hates the music of the youth, right? So I think that was what was going on there, right? And that's that's universal, but that is quite different from how like the white Southerners viewed it. Like, in fact, they didn't even call it blues; they called it quote race music,
right?
All right. So again, these sources are trying to like paint it like they shared a common ground and came together over their distrust of this music. And I think they hated it for different reasons.
Yeah, that's really fair. But yeah, if you listen to a couple generations after Robert Johnson, and people being confused or worried about, oh gosh, now we have this kind of bluesy rhythm and blues sort of music that sounds like gospel music, and that was really confusing and sometimes anger making for even people in the black community. They're like, no, those things should be completely separate.
Right. And now we got, mega churches with pastors with guitars. So
right. Let me rap to you about another really controversial guy. He had some crazy thoughts. Yeah. Now he never got his driver's license, and he didn't play Texas Hold'em. But
you're doing the lyrics to every megachurch song.
Yeah, that's right.
Now. You know who else was a rebel? Who loved God, guns, and freedom. But not guns, but yes, guns. Especially guns. No. Okay, now we jump in time to 1929. Robert marries a 16-year-old girl named Virginia. Virginia's family hated Robert because he was playing the devil's music. Robert promised to retire his guitar and be a father, but when Virginia became pregnant and went to live with her mother, Robert went on one final tour playing at these local joints. And when he returned, he discovered that Virginia and the child had died in childbirth, and the family blamed Robert, saying this was his punishment from God for playing the devil's music.
And that just is terrible. Again, like it's hard to think, even 100 years ago, where you wouldn't know that your wife and child were dead for weeks or maybe even months. Yeah.
Right. There's no mass communication. There's no no way to know.
Not even phone calls. People don't know where you are on the road, right?
Yes.
And that's going to have this really weird, eerie parallel to Robert's death, and people not realizing that Robert was dead near the end of the story as well.
Right. So now he has nothing left but his music, so he goes back to it. He began playing in Mississippi, where he met a guy named Son House. That is S-O-N, and then House, spelled the way House is, like H-O-U-S-E. Yeah. And now, Son House was a legendary Delta blues guitarist and a former preacher who sort of became, I'm going to say, one of Robert Johnson's mentors. And
it's like if there was a word for mentor that's like frenemy.
Yeah.
I think so. Both friend, enemy, like he's his mentor.
He was his friendtor.
No, but I'm saying maybe not mentor, but also he didn't particularly think that Robert Johnson was very good at guitar.
No, yeah, and that's part of this whole thing,
right? So mentor, unbeliever,
like reluctant mentor.
Yeah,
yeah. And the reason we're talking about him, he was the main witness to Johnson's like dramatic transformation from terrible guitarist to blues master.
Right.
So House and his musical partner Willie Brown, they were established performers around the Mississippi Delta, and young Robert Johnson would sort of like show up at their gigs as basically a blues groupie, and sort of like beg for a chance to get up on stage and play the guitar, and Son would oblige. But by all accounts, Robert Johnson was a terrible guitar player.
Right.
And I really thought this was going to be like some racist bullshit too, but it's Son House who's saying this.
Right.
And he's like playing and also Robert's playing for primarily black audiences in segregated communities, and by all accounts he was objectively bad. They called his music noisy. They said he was going to chase all the patrons out. They had like other musicians even telling him like not to touch their stuff because they're afraid he'd break it.
Yeah, he'd break strings is what I've heard. Yeah. And Sunhouse lived into the 80s, so there are like audio recordings of him saying this, that Robert Johnson was a terrible guitar player.
Yeah.
I have seen some places say that he might have been a good harmonica player. I'm not sure how well that, like, could you be a harmonica player in a band, you know, by itself without doing something else? I'm not sure. Yeah. But yeah, I've seen that he wasn't completely, which might explain why, you know, if Sunhouse and Willie Brown are like, this guy sucks. Like, why do we have him around at all? He might have had some other musical inclinations, but not guitar. They're very clear on that.
It's like do some harmonica stuff for us, and then we'll let you do like one song with the guitar or something like that.
But don't touch it. Yeah. Don't touch the guitar.
So Robert Johnson ends up disappearing for 3 years. And then he comes back to Son House and he takes the stage. One thing folks claim now is that Robert had a 7th string on his guitar for some reason. When he showed up again.
I don't know enough about guitars.
Yeah, can you tell folks we don't know music, so we're kind of...
But wouldn't you need another peg for a 7th string to do anything?
I would assume so.
Okay, I don't know.
Yeah.
Because there are 6 pegs and 6 strings.
Yeah. But yeah, he begins to play and he blows everyone away. It's not just good, it's great. People say it sounds like 3 people are playing at once, with one playing bass, one playing the main score, and one playing the rhythm all at the same time. Now, again, we don't know music. I'm guessing that's either very impressive or downright impossible.
I did happen to see someone explain what they were talking about. So this is in a Netflix documentary. There's a series called Remastered that goes into, most of it's about like musical tragedies. So like the Miami band, the Irish band that got killed by terrorists or things like that. But so this one is all devilly. So the first 2 minutes are all like very this is the devil, etc. But once you get past that, it's a really good documentary, actually. And they have musicians explaining about Robert Johnson, and then they also have interviews with his grandson, and they go to the house that they think he was born in and stuff like that. So it's pretty good if you get past. I was worried about the first 2 minutes of it. It looked like, you know, what's the word? Like really splashy and really
like devil.
Yeah, exactly. But anyways, in that interview, one of the musicians, they interviewed Keith Richards and Taj Mahal and Bonnie Raitt and a bunch of people. But one of them was explaining that like we might not be able to hear what they're talking about in the 20s when they're saying Robert Johnson sounds like 2 or 3 people are playing, because now we've adopted his ways of playing the guitar. So the way that a guitarist might use his thumb to play at the bottom strings while he's also using his index and pointer fingers and middle fingers to play the upper strings, that wasn't really done. And then if you could do that while using your hand to slide, you know, that slide sound that you make on a guitar.
Right. Yeah.
So it could sound like there were 3 people playing a guitar at once. And nowadays we just recognize that that's what one person playing guitar was. But
God, and that's just the sound of a good guitar player.
Right. Now. So he came out of nowhere again, you know, like I've seen 1 year, 3 years, something like that. He disappears. No one's thought about him for a while. And then he has reinvented the way to play the guitar.
Right. So it's kind of like saying it's like we can't really understand Shakespeare's contribution to acting or writing because now everybody just kind of like uses his tools.
Right. Exactly. I think that's exactly right. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, I want to be very clear here, folks. Apparently, everyone who heard him play was impressed, but he still wasn't very famous while he was alive. He traveled from town to town. He played his music, and then he would, pack up his guitar mid-set sometimes and disappear for a year at a time. Very nice, very devil. Kind of like our Mr. Scratch, just like showing up in town one day, and then he's gone. Right. I like how he's sort of taken on these devilish characteristics himself.
Right.
Yeah. Now, November 23rd to 25th of 1936 may be some of the only dates we are sure about regarding his life. He met with a local radio jockey who recorded 16 of his songs in a nearby hotel room, and then less than a year later, on June 19th of 1937, Robert recorded 13 more. And those 29 songs are all we have of his music. Now, around this time, a story began to take shape about those 1 to 3 missing years and Robert's sudden miraculous talent. And like every good folktale and every good devil story, there are multiple versions of this story, but the gist is this. One night, after bombing yet again, Robert made his way to the intersection of Highway 49 and 61 in Clarksdale, Mississippi, the Crossroads, where he waited for midnight. The clock strikes 12. Robert gets out his guitar and begins to play. Nothing happens at first, but then he spies a tall black man walking out of the tall grass. All the accounts I've read have Robert knowing exactly who this is immediately. There's no question, no need even for an introduction. Now, this man asks if he can tune Robert's guitar. Robert gives it to him, and he begins to tune it then and there and play a few songs. Some accounts say this is where the devil didn't just play, but taught Robert Johnson to play. I don't know which version I like better, right? The devil as your teacher or him just tuning the guitar and that makes the magic. Both are cool. But after a while, he hands the guitar back and disappears into the tall grass. And so people believe that this was the signing of the contract. That is so interesting. I think it's the most unique version of that so far, right? There's no paper to sign. There's no terms, not even like a spoken promise. They like, in some stories, they didn't even speak except for, the guy asking to tune his guitar. What do we think of this? What do we think of this version?
It's interesting because it's because it is told by other people, right? Like Robert Johnson didn't go into town and say this happened. So there also isn't any dialogue of what happened either, right? So in some ways they're like it's very Faustian, right? But there isn't. We don't have the back and forth. So in all the different versions of people talking about this, there isn't like devil dialogue of saying Robert Johnson, you have come to the crossroads, and this is what you're and Robert Johnson agreeing to it. It's just this unspoken thing, which is interesting. But maybe also it's about the power of music. It's about the music, man. It's not about words and contracts. Yeah,
and that's so fitting. And also, just like the lack of details adds both to the realism of it because it's like, nobody else was there, so like we're not going to have a script for these two characters to follow.
Right.
But then also it adds to the biblicalness of it because the Bible also doesn't have a script, right? And the devil came to him in the desert and offered him this, and Jesus refused. And it's not like nobody else has details because it was only those two in the desert, right? Just like nobody else has details because it's only these two at the crossroads. All right. So, like, making it sound more real and also more biblical at the same time.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And also, I like the addition of the devil being just like you. He's like, well, I'm a guitar player myself. I love that because we haven't had that yet, right? Because like Faust summons the devil, and the devil is his own thing, right? And we haven't had a story yet where somebody summons the devil to get something. It's like, I want to be an artist. It's like, oh well, I'm the master of artists. That's a really cool detail. Is like, oh, the devil is a guitar player too. Ooh,
I guess it also speaks to the idea that maybe the blues music is the devil's music, right? It is because the devil isn't like it's Robert Johnson doesn't hand him the devil. He's like, what is this? Some kind of lute? right? He doesn't. He says like, I know exactly what this is. Right?
Well, so I imagine he's been keeping up with the times.
Right, but he doesn't play the gospel. He doesn't play on the organ and have tambourines, for instance, right? He's like, I'm keeping up with the new stuff, the stuff that the kids like, because that is the devil's music.
Yeah, can you imagine, right? He gets to the crossroads, and the devil's like, yeah, let me tune your guitar. I'll teach you how to play the devil's music. I'm on top of the world looking
down on creation. Right. Or just this little light of mine, I'm going to make it shine.
Robert Johnson's like, what? But yeah, no, I like that. It's like, and I think from this point on, like when you have the devil approaching the main character of the story, there is some kind of like, hey, it's like we're not so different, you and I. Like it's like, oh, you really want to be a race car driver? Well, hop into my race. I've been racing cars since there were cars. Yeah. You want to be a dentist? Well,
Yeah. Hey, put your fingers in my mouth.
Yes. You sure you're the devil? Yeah. Shuck it.
Right. Put them in my mouth.
Hey, you want to be the president? I can make that happen for you. Yeah. You want to be a priest? Anyway. Now, folks, another account is that this whole story came from a guy named Tommy Johnson.
Tommy Johnson.
What are you doing here? Tommy Johnson, parentheses, unrelated. No relation, right? But also in Mississippi, Tommy and his family were the ones who propagated the story that Tommy sold his soul at a crossroads in order to play the guitar. Now, some folks say what happened is that people looked at that story, and this is from one Johnson, who was telling it while he was alive, right? And they took the songs from Robert Johnson, which are very devilly, and they sort of mashed them together, and they got confused. You can, but actually, for as far as Tommy Johnson, you can see him in "Oh Brother, Where Art Thou?" Or well, the character of Tommy Johnson, not actually Tommy Johnson. Or is it? No, it's not. But you can see the character of Tommy Johnson saying in that movie that he just got done selling his soul to the devil at the crossroads.
You know, that you've just reminded me that is the first time I heard of Robert Johnson. Is by seeing "Oh Brother, Where Art Thou?" and learning about Tommy Johnson, and then going like, that's weird. That's a weird character because "Oh Brother, Where Art Thou?" is a Coen Brothers movie, and it is based on the Odyssey. And so it's them returning from prison and then going through and then battling John Goodman, who's the Cyclops, and meeting the sirens and that kind of thing. And then there's this Tommy Johnson character, and it's like, well, where is that in the Odyssey? And then looked it up and saw Robert Johnson.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So okay, that makes a lot of sense. But yeah, Tommy.
They blind John Goodman, and he's like, ah! And then like all his other like politician friends are like, who blinded you? And it's like, Tommy Johnson. There's a Tommy Johnson. I thought it was Robert Johnson. Oh.
No, they meet him and he has an eye patch already.
I was gonna say, does he have an eye patch?
Yeah, he has an eye patch. So they never call him the Cyclops or anything like that. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, but they it's the three prisoners, Clooney and they meet the Tommy Johnson character. He's sort of a side character, but he's on their side. He's a good side dude. But so Tommy Johnson. Let me make sure I'm being clear about what's Johnson. So he said this during his lifetime, and he lived past Robert Johnson by a couple decades. And then his Tommy Johnson's brother, Liddell Johnson, would repeat the story even after Tommy Johnson's death, and it shows up in like his biographies and stuff. And then so I don't know if we have where it got transferred over to Robert Johnson. Yeah, because I don't think that. I guess the other solution would be that people locally knew about Robert Johnson, and then Tommy Johnson started repeating it about himself or something. But it seems more likely that this was a Tommy Johnson story originally, and then sometime in the 70s, 80s, 90s, we just started saying it was Robert Johnson.
Yeah, that sounds about right. But it just the confusion about it. Again, it does the same thing as the Crossroads thing. Is it adds to the realism of it because it's like the historicity. It's like having two Jesuses that Pilate is like, oh, do I release this Jesus or Jesus Barabbas? Yeah. But then also the biblicalness of it, because it's like it's mysterious. It's like it's almost like they're these like twins or doppelgangers or something.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But again, we never have anywhere. We don't have any Robert Johnson's writings or anything like that, so we don't have anywhere where he has said that this story happened to him.
Right. Yeah, and that's the other difference is that Tommy Johnson has been was very, very vocal about, yes, I sold my soul to the devil to play guitar. And Robert Johnson, they were kind of whispering that about him.
Right.
Yeah. And like by all accounts, like he didn't do anything to like dissuade them of that. And now, like I said, one of the reasons Robert Johnson's tale became so popular is that we don't really know a whole lot about him. Like Keenan said, there are only 2 confirmed pictures of him. And then add to that the stark difference in talent and ability from the beginning of his story to the end. Right. But that might actually have a more reasonable explanation, though no less interesting. So
no less interesting than him selling his soul to the devil.
I think this other tale is pretty interesting.
All right, I'm listening.
Listeners, you decide.
I'm leaning in. Okay.
So during those missing 1 to 3 years, some say he went under the tutelage of Ike Zimmerman. Now, Ike Zimmerman was this famous blues musician who sort of took Robert under his wing. Yeah. And at night, they would reportedly practice in the cemetery.
Oh,
how cool is that?
I see why you're like, yeah, okay, gotcha.
Right? And Zimmerman's reasoning for this is that you get the best of both worlds. You get an audience, and no one's going to complain. I like adding a little humor into that as well, And so they would play until the wee hours of the morning. And I imagine for anyone passing by and seeing this, that kind of like stoked the fires of like imagination. And there was like, oh yeah, maybe that isn't Ike Zimmerman out there. Maybe that's the devil,
Right. Uh-huh.
Yeah.
So just as a quick aside, so it's Ike Zimmerman. You will also see his name is Zinnerman with ends, which again is just like the weird version of history out there that is hard to keep track of those. But in the historical marker site about Robert Johnson that's in Hazelhurst, Mississippi, it spells it Ike Zinnerman.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, and apparently that's links back and forth there. So again, like, he it's 1910 and it's hard to keep track.
Yeah. Tommy Johnson, Robert Johnson.
Yeah. Or Ike Zinnerman is his devil name.
Yeah. Now, according to legend after this, trouble seemed to follow Robert Johnson wherever he went. He traveled from town to town. He would flirt with some of the girls. He would go and sing and play at their houses, and whenever he rolled through town again, he would visit them. This guy named Sonny Boy Williamson, what a name, who knew him, said they were once at a bar in Greenwood, Mississippi. The bartender poisoned a bottle because he was actually one of the women's husbands. And Williamson told Robert not to drink it, but Robert kind of like shrugged him off and drank it anyway. And after this, he was in agony for days, bleeding out of his mouth. And then one night he crawls out into the street, he looks up at the stars, and he dies. Now,
Yeah, I saw a version, I think it's in the Netflix documentary remastered, where, his friend tries to take the bottle out of his hand because the seal has been opened. And Robert Johnson, who in this version is a little more human and not so saintly, is like, don't you ever knock $7 worth of alcohol out of my hand again. Like, I don't care if it's poisoned, frankly. Like, that's expensive alcohol. Yeah.
So, Robert died, reportedly, on August 16th, 1938. His death certificate lists the date, the place, Greenwood, Mississippi, and nothing else. No cause or reason given, which, of course, added to the mystery. Like, many think this is when the devil came to collect. All right. We also don't know exactly where he's buried, apparently. There are 3 possible graves, but no one is sure exactly.
And to be clear, all 3 of the graves say that they are where he is buried.
Yes.
All 3 of them are like, this is the real Robert Johnson's burial ground. Come to us, right? Like, historically, culturally, but also tourist money-wise, like, this is where you should be coming. So.
And they'll all have reasons for it. It's like, well, ours is true because I don't know why I'm doing the Maine accent again. Well,
well, you could do the country lawyer.
I got to get into it.
You got to imagine your suspenders.
I said, now I'm just it's Foghorn Leghorn. That's what it is.
Basically,
Now, Your Honor, and members of the jury.
Very good.
When I tell you that this is the death place of, I'm getting so confused because it's hot in here and we don't have central cooling.
It's hot in here.
So hot. And I'm powerful fat.
That's right.
Anyway.
Yeah, so you might be asking, if he was murdered, then what happened to the murderer, which is another part of this. So various justifications for this. We don't know if he was murdered, right? This is part of the legend of him. It's very possible he got sick and died. That happened in rural Mississippi in the 30s all the time. You would get sick from something, you didn't know you were sick, and an apparently healthy person would drop dead. That's not, magic need not apply. Right. But so it might have been, so some people were like, okay, it's the devil. Other people said, like, okay, he was murdered, which again isn't necessarily historically backed up. But if he was murdered, then what happened to that murderer? And part of that legend, some people have said that that they let that murderer get away with it, which might have been because, okay, Robert Johnson's cheating on, or having affairs with the guy's wife back then.
The bartender,
Yeah, might be like, okay, that's something, we let people like that off, right? You get to kill your wife's lover in these days. And other people have said that, well, Robert Johnson was doing the devil's music, so people were not quick to support him because he played the blues.
Yeah. And you could also, let's not pretend. It could have been a racial thing. It could have been like, it's like, oh, well, the cops are like, it's like, oh, it's, this black guy got killed.
Yep, by another black guy.
Yeah.
Who cares, right?
Right. Or, well, wait, was the bartender? I should have checked. But I mean, like it could have been as simple and shitty as that. It's like, well, we're not going to waste resources on, on this crime. So,
right. Right. If it was a crime, though, is what I'm saying.
Right. And it's like, but that just kind of like, it sours the whole, it's like, nobody knows. And it's like, the reason nobody knows is because nobody cared.
Right.
And that's worse than any devil story. It's like, nobody went to investigate, like nobody, because it was a black guy.
Yeah. I mean, so in The Devil and Tom Walker, the wife disappears, and he like that's a joke there, right? He's like, I didn't look into it any further because the wife died. But here, again, this is where the Robert Johnson story or the Tommy Johnson story is so interesting, is because it's both legend and history. This is a really influential person who actually existed.
Right.
But yeah, that some of the problems in the history, like you're saying, like racism and classism and even some bias against blues music.
Yeah. So like the real like logical explanations are certainly less fun and possibly just downright sad.
Right.
And says something about like us as human beings.
Right.
Now, if this date of birth in 1911 is accurate, then Robert is actually the founding member of the 27 Club. For those who don't know, the 27 Club is comprised of artists and musicians who died at 27. We got Jimi Hendrix, Janis Joplin, Jim Morrison, Amy Winehouse, and Kurt Cobain. There are a few other notable members of this club. But if this birth date and this death date are accurate for Robert Johnson, then he was the first.
Yeah, especially in regards to rock music, right?
Right.
And it's become such a big thing, that 27 age for troubled artists, that you sometimes see like Jean-Michel Basquiat, like who's an artist, he's like a painter, as opposed to like a musician, right? It's like, well, that was a troubled person. He died at 27. Let's lump him in there. But if we're talking about it being a rock and roll type of death, then Robert Johnson might be the first of them.
Yeah. Now, one thing we got to remember is that Robert grew up being told he was of the devil. The music he loved was sinful. It was wicked. And so a lot of folks think that maybe he was capitalizing on that. Just listen to any of his songs, right? Me and the Devil Blues, Hellhound on My Trail, Crossroad Blues, right? If this isn't supernatural, it's very good marketing. But there's another way to interpret these songs, actually. So most of the Delta blues musicians were only 1 or 2 generations removed from slavery.
Right.
And scholars reflect that Hellhound on My Trail could be an allusion to a time when enslaved people were running for their lives, for their freedom, with dogs chasing them. Just as bad, worse than hellhounds. Because it's real. Hellhounds aren't real. Anyway, the song Crossroad Blues never actually mentions a deal with the devil.
It sure doesn't.
Yeah. But it does talk about the sun going down, which you might know after slavery was abolished, thousands of towns across America became known as, quote, sundown towns. They got this name from signs they posted, implicit threats that if you were black and you let the sun go down on you here, you would be lynched. And I say towns, but it was also whole counties and even the entire state of Oregon that banned blacks from settling.
But again, even visiting overnight or not getting back to where you came from. So you can come to the general store and do your business here, but you got to leave. And there are versions of this for Native Americans as well in the West. And even in Nevada, I think that there was a town that had a what do you call it? like that alarm, like a siren, like a nuclear siren.
Oh, you just like, oh, geez, there's definitely a name for that. I don't know.
Yeah. Sorry, but that would be the warning that they had to get out of town. Before long.
Before sundown.
That.
Yeah. Because that's when the folks will come out and do stuff.
But in Nevada, a state that prides itself, if you're from Nevada, we call ourselves Battleborn, and that's our motto, and we pride ourselves on the whole mythology of the creation of the state of Nevada is that we joined the Union in time to give our 3 electoral votes to Abe Lincoln so that he could be reelected in 1964, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
And yes, folks, sundown towns still exist today. Let's not kid ourselves. In fact, Keenan, can you guess when lynching was officially recognized as a hate crime?
Oh, this is like at the national level? It was relatively recently, wasn't it? It was shockingly recently. They would come up for votes all the time and get voted down.
Yeah.
Do you have it?
Yeah, I do. This was the Emmett Till Anti-Lynching Act, which President Biden signed into law on March 29th, 2022. 2022.
That's very recent, I believe.
That's quite recent, folks. Making lynching a federal hate crime for the first time in U.S. history. 2022. What makes this so shocking is the time, like the first federal anti-lynching legislation was introduced in 1900.
Okay, yeah.
By Representative George Henry White of North Carolina, and over 200 attempts failed over more than 120 years before this finally passed.
Yeah, that would come up all the time, and like every Congress would try to pass it, or not try to pass it. Right.
I remember hearing this like when it happened, and my fellow white privileged folk were shocked. I've never heard of this. How have I never heard of this? This is the first time I'm hearing of it. Why do you think this is the first time you have ever heard of it?
Right.
Like, because this doesn't affect you. I hadn't heard of it until then either, because it's not something that I ever needed to worry about because of my privilege, right? But just because it's not in our spheres doesn't mean that other people aren't being terrorized every day. And 2022 people, like, Jesus Christ. And I heard about it in relation to Kentucky. I was trying to figure out, like, why is Kentucky in there? Apparently, Thomas Massey of Kentucky was one of the only 3 House Republicans who voted against it in the 2022 legislation. In 2022, Thomas Massey of Kentucky said, no, lynching is not a hate crime. So, along with Andrew Clyde of Georgia and Chip Roy of Texas. Surprise, surprise. Yeah, it truly mind-boggling that it took until 2022, well into the 21st century, folks, for lynching to become a federal crime. So, there are still sundown towns and sundown states even, but they're a little more subtle in how they carry out their hate, sometimes hiding behind a badge. It's for when their white hood is at the cleaners. Just don't wash it with your red hat. You're going to come out looking like a pink condom. Don't they all look like condoms?
The KKK?
Yes. Like, am I the only one who said, like, they look like used condoms? They look so fucking stupid.
I've never thought about it. They're wizards.
Yeah.
But that's from the song Crossroad you're talking about, the references to
the sundown,
to sundown. It's interesting because people do tend to pick and choose from his lyrics, and there are lyrics that I saw in the, again,
just like people do with the Bible.
Sure. But in the Netflix documentary, again, remastered, there's a scholar in there who's talking about some of Robert Johnson's lyrics being hoodoo related.
Right.
Yeah. But the Crossroads one is interesting. That's the one, if you Google Robert Johnson, that's a song that will be played a million times. And of course, we did the same. We talk about the Crossroads all the time.
Right.
But I went to the Crossroads, fell down on my knees, asked the Lord above, have mercy now, save poor Bob if you please. So that's not a devil worshipping song, I would say.
No, definitely not.
Again, it's not a church song, a gospel song, because it's blues inspired. But I mean, this is a song about a Christian, it sounds like.
Yeah. And it's, I mean, I can see how it can be twisted. It's like, like, talk me out of selling my soul, God, please, that type of thing.
Okay.
It's like save me from what I'm about to do, or something like that.
All right, I buy that.
Yeah. But again, see, it took me, I had to do some gymnastics to get there, right?
I'm fine with that.
Right? I need a little stretching. I'm 42 now, Yeah. But okay.
Let me read you one more. This is what song is this? This is Me and the Devil Blues. How about that? So this is Robert Johnson's Me and the Devil Blues.
I read part of that as our intro. Yeah.
Yeah. Early this morning when you knocked upon my door, and I said, "Hello, Satan. I believe it's time to go." And it's sort of about. It's sort of, I could see how you could read it and say, like, he decides to go with the devil, and he and the devil go and walk and stuff, but then by the end of it, he beats the devil, and he stays in the devil stays there, and he gets a Greyhound bus away from it. So,
right. Yeah.
So I don't know.
And I mean, before Robert Johnson, there have been, it's like, man, I'm on the devil's ticket on this, thing or something like that. It's just like, it's shorthand for, like, this is a bad time for me right now.
Yeah.
Right? Or I'm dealing with some really, really bad people, right? They're I got the devil on one side and an angel on the but I think because these songs, so like enough of these songs explicitly mention devil or hellhound or Satan or something like that, people are like, okay, this is like, we can draw from this.
Yeah, sorry, I was a little slow on picking up these lyrics here, but again, from the Me and the Devil Blues ends with, baby, I don't care where you bury my body when I'm dead and gone. You may bury my body down by the highway side, so my old evil spirit can get a Greyhound bus and ride. So it's like, that's not me anymore. So the middle of it is about him, hanging out with the devil and doing bad things, including like, beating women, but it's meant to be like, that was bad, that was wrong. wrong, and I've overcome that.
The devil could have, he could have been talking about alcoholism or a gambling thing, or just like his, what he wants to fix about himself.
Yeah, I think that's what that song is about, right? It's about him overcoming or trying to overcome that and fix that.
Yeah.
So it's not like later on, which we will do episodes later, right, about the relationship between the devil and supposed Satan worship in rock and roll and death metal and that kind of thing. Yeah. But it's not even like later on, Ozzy Osbourne, whoever, Mr. Crowley. But like pretending to be Satanist to piss people off, essentially.
Right.
Yeah, that's not what Robert Johnson is doing, but he ended up pissing people off anyways.
From my understanding, I may take this out because I'm not exactly sure, but I think Satanists pretend to be Satanists to piss people off.
That is my understanding of a lot of Satanists. Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. But I mean, isn't that just so perfect? No. But okay. But yeah, actually, so to that point, folks. Robert Johnson's family has said in the past that they do not like this devil narrative for obvious reasons, but also because, A, not only does it downplay Robert's skill and dedication to his craft, but B, you also can't deny that it smacks of racism in that the only way these white evangelicals will allow that Robert was a good musician was that he must have sold his soul.
Okay.
This guy named Robert McCormick spent a good part of his life researching Robert Johnson, and apparently he was able to track down the bartender who poisoned him and get a confession out of him, though in exchange he promised never to reveal his name to the public. It's very convenient.
As you were saying, I was like, why didn't you call him a historian, Robert McCormick? Oh, I see, because he's not a historian. Because he does. No historian would ever make that agreement.
No. Now, we should also note that, yes, McCormick was not on the up and up. He was kind of crazy, kind of hounding and threatening Robert Johnson's family. And eventually getting the rights to Johnson's estate so that he could get all the memorabilia. He stole photos from the family. He would call the family pretending to be everything from a police officer to a preacher, threatening them with legal harassment if they didn't do what he wanted. Now, some folks say that this is evidence of the devil infecting anyone who gets too close to the Robert Johnson story. But personally, I think this guy was just a colossal piece of shit.
Oh, that sounds terrible.
Yeah, hounding this grieving family. Come on.
But it's again the grandsons who were in the documentary that I happen to see, they talk about their grandfather, and they're really proud to be because Robert Johnson was incredibly influential, right? So he was only known after his death, and he influenced all sorts of people. So people are really excited, they like that part of it. And it's like, okay, so maybe you and I could have fun. And I do think it's fun, like the story of him going out into the woods and disappearing and selling his soul to the devil. That's really fun. Yeah. But he's not my grandfather. This is a real person that we're talking about.
Exactly.
Whose relatives are still around.
Yeah, this isn't Johann Georg. Well, I guess he was real too, but he's old,
Right, exactly.
Yeah, but this isn't a Faust. This isn't a Daniel Webster. Well, damn it, Daniel Webster's real too.
But he wasn't president, so fine.
Yeah. But no. This is a flesh and blood person who still has relations who miss him while this story is happening.
Right.
All right.
But if I could tell a story real quick again about the bookend about he had left his wife and who was pregnant, and then the wife and the son had both died in childbirth, and he came back and didn't know what had happened. Right. It's weeks on the road or months on the road, and you don't know. Right. So Robert Johnson died at some point, but then in 1938. People had started to hear that, white people like at Columbia and in places like that, Columbia Records, they had started to hear of Robert Johnson's just music, not even the devil story or anything like that. And they started to, other people had emerged, like Muddy Waters was coming up in this time period. And so there was a guy, a record producer named Don Law, who was going to put on a show at Carnegie Hall that he called From Spirituals to Swing. And so he put that on. So it was about, black music. And hey, everybody, let's put this on in New York at Carnegie Hall, this big famous venue. And he went and tried to get a bunch of black musicians from the Mississippi Delta. And then by the time he had gone to search down there, he did not know that Robert Johnson was dead. So it's a little bit similar to what happened to Robert Johnson. So people looking and then getting down to Mississippi and realize, okay, Robert Johnson died a really undignified, like unheralded death. Right. So what Don Law did for the Robert Johnson portion at Carnegie Hall is that he put a record player in a spotlight on stage at Carnegie Hall, and then people who were listening to him, and again, it's tough when we're dealing with legend, but people there apparently were as impressed with Robert Johnson's record playing as the people who had heard him live, and were like, wow, I've never heard music like this again. Like being told that one person is playing this guitar instead of 2 or 3 people on guitar at the same time.
Just from a record playing, like that's crazy to think about. And I heard that story too, and it was then that they started, it's like, oh, Robert Johnson, we gotta like figure out who this guy is. But Robert Johnson finally received widespread critical praise in 1961 when his album King of the Delta Blues Singers was re-released. And from there, just like Keenan said, artists like Eric Clapton, Keith Richards, Led Zeppelin, Elvis,
Bob Dylan,
the Beatles, right, have either covered his music or talked about how it influenced them. Keith Richards famously says about his music, "You want to know how good the blues can get? Well, this is it."
Yeah. So this, we're not we're not experts in anything. We should have said at the beginning.
You should have known that before you.
Yeah, but it was world changing to me when I was in college and started to look into the history of rock music, and the first people I think of are the Beatles and the Rolling Stones, and they were, and they've said this, and their biographers have said this, and people around them have said this, is that the way they came up with their sounds was trying to mimic Black American singers. Yeah, right. So that's why when they sing, they sound so different from their speaking voices, obviously, but they were just listening to Black American singers and mimicking that. So this is Robert Johnson changed the world because of the people that he influenced.
Right. He, I think one of his titles is the grandfather of rock and roll.
The grandfather. I like that.
Yeah.
So you can go to this historical marker that I was talking about, which does not mention the devil anywhere, which is fine, I guess. It's like an official like blue historical marker, et cetera, and it's about him and all that. But doesn't mention that. It's a tiny, tiny font at the back. But you can go to the crossroads that this supposedly happened on, which is Route 49 and Route 61 in Clarksville, Mississippi. And again, no real overt devil signature, but they have a big like 2 guitars crossing each other, or 3 guitars crossing each other.
I like that.
Yeah, and so like some people recognize that this is part of where the legend happened.
Right.
That the legend does exist. Because I guess I'm saying that because oftentimes you'll see kind of 2 threads about the historiography of this. Like we're writing about this only as his influence as a person, and then we're writing about him only as his influence as a legend with the devil tales. So there's a little bit of crossover, but oftentimes it's like those are 2 different people, essentially.
Almost, yeah. Like one's Tommy Johnson and one's...
Oh, that's true.
Yeah. And folks, I really, really wanted to, and I think Keenan wanted to too, get into just like how the devil's music kind of becomes this idea, and different genres of music have been named the devil's music, right? So we have blues, we have rock and roll, we have like all this stuff. I think we're going to get into that a little bit later, maybe in a new season. We'll just call it the devil's music, and we'll talk about like all the bands, and and basically we'll get a list of everybody who's been accused of playing the devil's music.
Accusing themselves even.
Accusing themselves, and like getting the costumes and everything.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. So I think that'll be fun.
Is Gwar the devil, or are they just like
Gwar?
Oh, Google them and you'll see. But again, that's the whole point that what you're talking about is we might have to do this later. But they put on huge like
image search has given me like green beans.
GWAR.
Oh, GWAR.
Yeah, I don't know much about their music.
Oh, geez.
But I think you would like their shows.
He looks very devilly.
Yeah. Exactly.
Can you imagine? It's like, no, actually, it's mainly polka.
That's the Gwar polka. Yeah, but they have like sci-fi shows. And stuff.
Okay.
I knew them from Beavis and Butthead.
Aha. Okay. Gwar. All right.
Gwar.
Yeah. From Robert Johnson to Gwar. There we go.
But yeah, thanks for doing this, Lester. I think this is a really cool. Again, this one's weird because it's a real person.
Right.
Yeah, but this is a really cool part of Americanizing the Devil story.
Yeah. No, this is. I I think we have to have this part. Like, I don't think you have your future devil stories without it. This is a key component. So thank you for introducing me to this. Yeah. Well, folks, this has been another episode of The Devil's Details. I've been Lester Ryan Clark. You can summon me on all the socials as Lester Ryan Clark.
And I've been Keenan Diaz, and you can invoke me on Instagram and Letterboxd as Howdy Keenan.
Yeah, for more of our shows and other really cool podcasts, go to truestory.fm. Or you can drop us a message at Banana for Scale Mail, that's MAIL, @gmail.com. We got our Facebook listener group, Banana for Scale. That's a community for all of our shows, including this one. It's a private group, but just request to join, and we'll let you into the Infernal family. If you want more, consider joining us at truestory.fm/join and look for Banana for Scale. You get bonus episodes of all our shows, access to our Discord, and you get your episodes a week early. Pretty cool. And we'll throw in a mastery at the guitar or whatever instrument you choose. Right?
8 strings.
Yes. And we'll even tell you our secret. 7 years of practice. You're welcome. All that for just $5. Now, wouldst thou like to live deliciously? We're not even asking for your souls. Just give us a 5 pentagram rating on iTunes or Spotify or wherever you listen to our show. That and sharing the show by word of mouth or on social media helps our little podcast grow and find more cool people like you. All right, folks, that's it. Until next week, love and hisses. Mwah.